Alright, let's begin. So for this video, we're going to talk about the wave manager as well as the critter spawners. So the wave manager, it is called, the open function is called once. So if we go over to wave manager, find our references, we can see that the only time this is called is right here. This populate function, we can see up here that this populate me is never called. And the private version is only called inside the game master singleton. So this will only ever be called once we create the game master, and this ensures that the file is read only once. All right. For the actual code itself, it takes a file path and sees if it can find the file. If it can't, then it crashes. If it can, it will go through every line of the file and see if it's in the right format. Format is the wave, followed by centipede, spider, flea, and then scorpion, with a blank space to denote when we're starting a new wave. This file expects everything in order, so if we were to start wave 9 immediately, we will get a crash. It says we're missing wave 1, and it says which line to check to try and find it. So if I just abort, so that stops that. If for some reason centipede data is not found first, then when we run it, we get a crash saying that we're missing the centipede data and to check that line. And then finally, if instead of a number, we put in some letters and then run it, we get a crash because we are missing an integer value for that position. Okay. Oh, shoot. Once we read through the data for a section, we will create this wave array strut. This strut stores all of the wave data for a specific wave, and then it will populate itself based off of functions. So if we just go to here, right here. So at the end of the centipede section, we send in centipede data. End of the spider section is spider data, flea, scorpion, etc. Once we are done with all the data, we push it onto a list, and then we repeat the process until the file is finished. When the file is finished, we close it, and because we're done reading, we now know the highest wave is whatever wave we stopped on. So now that we know the highest wave, we will go into the wave, we will create a new array using the size, with its size being that new highest wave value. And once we have that, we just take the list that we've been making and iterate through it to populate the array. This allows us to have rapid access to the data so that we can call it all faster. Other than that, we don't need that. Oh, shoot. So once we have that, the game master will get the wave data for the player based off of it will get the number from the current active player, and it will tell the wave manager to send data based off of that number. So the wave number, it will get the active player wave, and with that, it will send in all the data needed for each critter. It will instantly access that part of the array and then fill in the data. So for these spawners themselves, on creation, they get the current active grid, get their sounds and their scores. They will create their critters using factories, which I'll cover in a moment. And they will start playing their looping sounds on creation. They get the grid. Whenever they create something, they add it to the list. So if we find the references, we can see that when the spider is initialized, it will add itself to the list. The same is true for all of the critters. And then whenever we destroy one, then we will, oh shoot, wrong function. Whenever we destroy it, either by bullet or it going off screen, then we will remove it. Whenever the blaster is destroyed, we call this clear field function, and this will take however many critters on the field and wipe them. So for every active spider, we get the front of the list, mark it for destroy, and pop, and we do this until there are no spiders left. For the spiders, it doesn't really matter about the list, but it makes it matters more for the centipede when we can have multiple segments on the field at once. Once we are done with that, the sound manager, we will stop playing the loop sound because there's nothing on the screen, and then we reset the wave. Whenever we try to, where is, check spawn requirements where you referenced. Here we go. So, for alarm 0, whenever the time is up, we check to see if we can create a spider. So we check to see if it's present in the game and if there's one on screen. If there is, or if there's not one on screen and they can be spawned, then we create a spider. Otherwise, we do nothing. And whenever we remove a spider, we reset that cooldown. And this makes it so that if for some reason we kill the spider and we start the next wave, and the next wave has no spiders, then the alarm won't do anything because the spider has to check to see if it can spawn first. The scorpion is pretty much one-to-one what the spider was, except with scorpion stuff instead of spider stuff. So it creates itself from its own factory. It sends the start sound command. Whenever the scorpion is initialized, it's added to the list. Go back. Whenever it's destroyed, it is removed from the list. We'll cover sending score when we talk about the score manager. And then on clear field, it clears itself. Whenever it's removed, it also will stop playing its looping sound and reset its alarm, which it can only spawn itself if it succeeds a check spawn requirements check. So if one doesn't exist on the screen and also it can spawn, it will spawn one once the alarm runs out. Have some setters and destroy. Let's see, is there anything else for here? For the flea is slightly different because instead of having a alarm, it has to check the field. So whenever create flea is called, we have to check the flea requirements, and we also have to check to make sure we are on the active grid. So if those are true, then we will create a flea from the factory with the active grid and play the loop sound. So this check for flea is checked every time that there are 2 times this is checked. It's checked whenever it is destroyed. We have to check see if a new one needs to spawn, and it's also checked in the grid whenever a play space mushroom is removed. So whenever a mushroom is removed in the play space, we have to see if there are too few mushrooms in that space, and if that is the case, then we have to make sure we can spawn a new flea. For the centipede is a bit different because the centipede spawner has to handle both heads and segments. So it gets its sounds, it gets its score for the head and the segment. And then a lot of this code is duplicated, one for the head and one for the segment. So we have the create head section. This is called at the start of each wave. So it gets however many solo heads it has. For each of those, it will call the factory and create a head with its solo boolean set to true. So because it's set to true, that means when it initializes itself, its length will be 0, so it doesn't try and create any segments. Excuse me. After that, we will just create a normal segment, a normal head, without the is solo being true, so that it can create the segments behind it. And we also play the sound loop. After that, we have the promoted head sections. So it creates those. We have the clears and removes. For the clear, because it manages both heads and bodies, it has to clear both of them. And then down here, this is where all the centipede segment sections are. For sending, for muting, we have the mute me stuff. If we want to unmute, we have to make sure that they exist. So if there is an active head, or if there's an active head, we play the looping sound. Otherwise, we don't. Then when we mute, we stop it. For the heads, when we create it, we only create the looping sound once. Once everything's created, we start it. And when we create a promoted head, we don't create the start loop. We don't start looping the sound. This prevents it from being played multiple times because the looping sound should only be played once. All right. And that is it.